Happy New Year and welcome to Redesigning the Future of Work. This is a big year for us here at Inspire as we're celebrating our 15-year anniversary. And for those of you who don't know us, Inspire is a secret weapon to CHROs and CEOs alike to tackle whatever is on their HR agenda, those issues keeping them up at night, if you will. Whether it's providing interim talent to fill HR business partner roles, compensation, benefits, recruiting, whatever it is, we help to provide interim experts, help scaling teams, set up HR, and help with those strategic projects that lean teams are just trying to get done. When I think back to 2007, when we started, it's so thrilling to see Inspire's voice present in the various HR movements and challenges that have hit our industry, whether it was the recession in 2008 to navigating the Me Too movement, to advocating for transgender inclusion in the workplace, to encouraging that DEIB is woven into the entire employee experience. And this moment in time as we enter season 3 of the pandemic. And, it is fascinating to think back that for 2 years, this community has come together to learn, share information, and really welcome folks from our industry that are helping us navigate these very interesting times. Many of you have heard me say, I always believe on a spiritual level that fractional work makes us whole. Kind of the ability to work fractionally can give some folks that they need the time to show up for other areas on the home front. And I also believe that fractional work makes us whole as organizations, ensuring that having these flexible, elastic resources are very much part of companies' talent strategy and the way to attempt to navigate these times that we find ourselves in. According to the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, 4.5 million Americans quit their job in November alone, and it seems that the market is flooded with job openings. The number of open jobs in the US rose by 33% last year, and unemployment rates remain at the lowest since before the start of the pandemic at 4%. So we are all leading organizations during these times. I'm thrilled to be joined by 3 experienced HR pros who share their experiences and insights and tips for leaders in the market. Ellen Schultz is an HR executive and former chief people officer of Rent the Runway. Alice Chin is the founder and CEO of Your Other Half. And Beth Burkell is one of actually Inspire's experts, a skilled HR business partner who specializes in change management. Ellen, Alice, and Beth, thank you so much for being here. Thrilled to kick off 22 together. So our first question that we wanted to tee up, and again, we'll speak with the panelists for about 45 minutes, and the last 15 minutes we'll move to Q&A. So feel free to put questions in the chat, and we'll tee them up at the end. There's nothing that this crew has not dealt with. So we'll start with the question that's very much on my mind, just to really set the table. I'd love to just start by innovative ideas that you have witnessed in your various fields and how business leaders are maintaining productivity as they work simultaneously to fill all of these talent gaps. Alice, if we can start with you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Jamie. So I'll just share with everyone that my expertise is in small business HR. So we focus on companies with 2 to 99 employees. So think, anyone in the audience, if that's your audience, I probably will say things that are relevant to you, but if you're in larger companies, it may not be as relevant. For us, we're seeing a lot of productivity, kind of different tools being very useful during this time. So one of the things that was challenging for a lot of our clients was moving from being in an in-person environment where a lot of kind of understanding what productivity is was literally seeing what folks were doing, to understanding what's going on when folks are working at home. And we found that the implementations of both time tracking systems and project management systems has been extraordinarily and hugely helpful, I think, in 2 ways. One is really understanding how people are spending their time. It's a great tool for understanding, have I trained my team effectively? But also, are they using their time in the way that is most valuable to me and my organization? I think so many organizations have had to shift and pivot. And we've had so many conversations about that over the last 18 months. But what also needs to happen is that your team is pivoting with you to do the work that is most meaningful for your organization. And seeing how that's changing over time can really mean that folks need to be more aware of what's going on with their team, help them with that prioritization, help them with those different pieces, and help them be spending their time most wisely. The other thing that we've seen around productivity might feel counterintuitive, but the thing that we've seen is so many people are working from home. They're never really, disconnecting from work. They're kind of trying to manage childcare, and they're trying to manage working from home, and they're
Mhm.
trying to do all of it in the same space.
All of it at
And
once.
yeah, and it's just, and so there's this sense of like, I'm always working and I'm also never, never really fully working, right? I don't have that
Mhm.
kind of concentration and presence that I have before. So putting in practices that allow people to, one, fully disconnect from work, right? Which might be introducing the send later function in Slack and email. So if people feel like they can really disconnect, or being really clear about like, hey, we expect you to be available to respond to clients from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. But outside
Mhm.
of that, please take your time.
I
Making
love
sure that
that.
folks are actually taking their PTO. I think there was, particularly in the first year of the pandemic, there were a lot of folks like, I'm going to save it so I can actually go on vacation when I can travel again. But working for long, long periods of time without taking PTO does not help folks' productivity. And then implementing a practice that we call deep work, right, which is an agreement internally to allow people to be off Slack, be off email for an hour or two at a time so they can really focus on their work, has made an extraordinary difference for us and many of our clients. So just a few ideas to get you
Alice,
started.
I love all of your ideas. I often say that I feel like my husband and our two 16-year-olds have like moved into my office rather than I'm working for. It's like every room in the house now is a memory of a conference call or a Zoom meeting. I just feel like I'm walking through. And so we also just launched at Inspire a well-being pledge and have committed that for our leadership team, that Fridays are times, study hall time, we call it, just time to very much be offline and do that very intentional work that takes deeper concentration. So yeah, love that. Love all of that. Beth, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think building on what Al said, it's a variety of things, right? It is a work prioritization, right? And a focus around strategy. So what are the mission critical things that really need to get done, and what does not need to get done now, but you can wait for, because it's all about the talent shortages everybody's facing now. You can't ask everybody to do the same thing when the talent isn't there. So what really needs to get done? The other piece of it is really, with the talent you have, utilizing them in new and different ways. So perhaps stretching them to grow and keep and retain that talent, right? So whether it's, I've seen stretch assignments or projects that you may give people that you wouldn't necessarily think about to grow them internally and fill some of those gaps. One of the other things, so recently I was at a client, and to Alice's point, and just taking a step back a second, my background is more larger companies. So as you saw, GE and Pepsi, and I have been in a lot of larger businesses lately, particularly in financial services. So one of my clients recently, we had to readdress what were the organization norms. Right. So I think in the beginning of the pandemic, it swung all the way towards every meeting had to be on Zoom. You needed to see everybody to get any work done. And then it became, okay, only these critical meetings need to be on Zoom. Other things can be done in different ways. And how can we best leverage technology? So figuring out the norms that work for your organization.
Well said. And like all things, Beth, the tone is always set at the top. So for
Mm-hmm.
leaders, then to role model that, whether it's being disconnected, using Friday, days for that deep work, whatever the thing is, whatever the thing du jour is that you're trying
Right.
to really set that tone, because all it takes is for leaders not to emulate it, and employees think, well, am I going to ever get ahead if I don't follow suit? So really well said. Um, would love to dive into this idea of how we've had to also navigate employers in different work environments. So would love to speak a bit about how the approaches may vary of these retention and productivity strategies for workers who are in kind of plant or distribution centers, who have had to be on site from the start of the pandemic, to workers who are more referred to as knowledge workers that do have the flexibility to be remote or work hybrid. So Ellen, if we can start with you, because you've definitely been in both spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that question. There are certainly a lot of differences And I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about keeping your workers so you can be productive as opposed to keeping your workers productive. But I think some of my thoughts certainly blend across both. So
yes.
Plant and distribution workers have been at the forefront of this conversation throughout the pandemic. And as consumers, we see and feel how the global supply chain has been disrupted by these workforces being thin on the ground, having COVID outbreaks at plants, and resignations everywhere. So it's really, really important. And as someone who's worked with these populations, I actually think I have a lot of gratitude towards employees who work in these spaces. These are the employees who get your from Rent the Runway, get your clothes delivered to you, get your news on your doorstep. They're really, really critical workers. So tons of differences, but everybody at work wants a handful of things. People want to be respected. They want to do satisfying work. They want fair pay and benefits, and they want a safe and inclusive environment. And so how does that show up in an on-site workforce, distribution, or warehouse? So I think there's some differences here in company stage as well. So a longer, more tenured company probably has more sort of chits in the relationship bank than a newer company that might be pressed for quarterly profitability numbers. So certainly all organizations are different here. But one really critical thing is showing respect to these employees who are showing up day after day after day. And that takes different forms. Make sure that they feel seen. Make sure the workers who are going every day feel seen. So different ways of doing that. Communications. I'm sure everyone has their communications game in pretty good shape after 24 months of this. But make sure that you acknowledge in conversations about returning to the office that you've got employees who've been going to their version of an office every single day. So acknowledge that. Try to make sure that your distribution lists are really clean. So just this is some practical tips. Make sure those distribution lists are clean so you don't have misfires. Welcome back to the office. Feels pretty crummy when you have been going to work every day.
Absolutely. So that would come across as so tone deaf. Thank you. That is,
Exactly. And get to the locations. If you're in leadership and you're in HR, show up. Experience what the workers are doing. Try to work the line. At my last company, the CEO would work the line in difficult physical jobs. So show that kind of respect. At the times where I worked, you had people who were generations of the same family working in the printing plant because they felt this great connection to the purpose of the organization. Try to embrace those sort of legacies and traditions. And I have a great example about embracing traditions from my time at Rent the Runway, which is that pre-pandemic, the executive team would go and serve Thanksgiving dinner, which was a busy weekend. And we did that in 2020. So keep those important transitions. I would say try to keep the work satisfying by doing constant improvements. You can still do improvements even though we're in this pandemic. Think about the work. How many steps does it take to do the work? Make it simpler, make it easier, make it less backbreaking through technology and constant improvements. And that will reduce sort of friction and people thinking about leaving. One thing I want to touch on is fair pay. So pay is really, really important to workers who are making an hourly wage in these distributions manufacturing center. There's a resource I would direct everyone to, which is the MIT Living Wage Calculator. You really want to make sure that your teams in these centers are making a wage that you can feel proud that they're getting and that they can pay their bills. If your employees are worried about making the rent, paying for groceries, it's stressful for them. They're going to have more absenteeism. And you really want to bring that up. Now, I know that is not an easy thing for a lot of organizations to do, but think about creative ways of compensation, giving bonuses. Bonuses aren't going to live on your bottom line forever. So think about ways to do that, productivity bonuses. I would really encourage making sure that you feel like all employees in your organization have a fair wage. And I'm going to switch real quickly. I know I've been talking a little long. I'm going to leave you with one practical tidbit about knowledge workers, which is stay interviews. So like an exit interview, but it happens before the employee has resigned. Give people a chance to tell them what's working, what's not working, what makes them stay, and then you can do something about it.
Thank you for all of that. We always recommend stay interviews, and we just in January finished them with the Inspire leadership team. And it is, I think, just as you said, it's find out why they stay. Everyone has options historically, especially now. And I think it's brilliant. I loved all of your tips around the folks who are on site and have been ever since. It is, I actually spoke, who'd have, and also just to re-examine that certain jobs that we thought had to be on site are not, like, I don't know, teachers, but like there are some jobs, and Ellen, you talked about 2 organizations rent the runway, and there are times where it just wasn't even an option. And so to keep those traditions and have executives show up is huge. One of our clients were sharing a story that there was a challenge because they very much have a distribution center, and they do all sorts of things to create a sense of inclusion. And they kept their tradition and always made a big celebration on Mother's Day because they're around the clock. And then when Father's Day came, there was nothing in place. And the people who were fathers, guardians really spoke up, and they said that it just didn't feel inclusive. And so this was something that I think that the fathers at that distribution center had noticed for a long time, but this moment of fatigue that everyone's in gave them voice to finally speak their truth of what was going on for them. So I would also just add to that, if you have folks in distribution centers, plants that are finally moved during this fatigue, this exhaustion that we're living in, to speak their truth, pays extra attention because they've probably been feeling it for a while and finally found the words. Yeah. Excellent thoughts on all of that. And I also love what you said about how it really doesn't matter whether folks are on site or not. On a human level, folks just want the same thing. They want to put milk in their fridge. They want to be able to fill their car with gas. They want to do work that challenges them, take care of the loved ones at home, all that stuff. Yeah. Whether on the topic of the returning to office for those where there has been just absolute whiplash about whether to bring people back or not, in that continuing chapter, novel with all those chapters, there is such a disconnect right now where many leaders and their employees are in very different places about when it comes to flexibility at work. And this, we're learning, can absolutely be a retention issue, especially in these times. Ernst & Young did a study reported in September that revealed that 35% of employers want to return to office when it is safe to do so, while 90% of employees want that flexibility still in place. They've kind of seen things that they can't unsee. They've been home for dinner. They've had a touch of productivity even, and they don't want to go back. So this disconnect is something that is really, I find, keeping a lot of our heads of HR up at night. So I'd love to hear from you. What are, how can employers address this gap, this difference to retain their current workforce and attract new talent? Ellen, do you want to kick that one off?
Sure. And I totally agree with you. Like, it's very difficult to put the genie back in the bottle here. And my thought here is really that employers need to really think long and hard. If this is where they've landed, they need to be crystal clear about why they've landed here, why their workers have to be in the office full time. And they need to be able to very clearly explain that. What is the reason? Is it because of culture? Is it because of issues around risk? Is it because we need to be collaborative and creative, and then talk to your employees about that. And hopefully you will gain some traction, and then go away and talk amongst yourselves as an executive team and challenge all of your assumptions. Because I really doubt that most organizations really need to have all of their employees back. So I think this actually, I would say, be more introspective with those leaders.
I mean, if you just think, I brought up the example of teachers, but like think of like court cases happening online, like areas of life and society that you would never think you could do virtually. There you are from your dining room table. Beth.
Yeah, there was an interesting article on January 27th on CNN that talked about how leaders were testing their limiting beliefs, to your point, and they were going remote permanently when that was not their initial viewpoint, right? I think, and I've seen an example of it myself. Another one of my clients had a global CEO, US branch, but global CEO. And the CEO very focused on everybody back in the office, really wanted people back in the office 5 days a week, right? No, that's not going to happen. You know, people were protesting, but still said, okay, I want people back 3 days a week, and here's how it's going to happen, and we're going to do it. And what happened was, so they did that, and he started seeing resignations all over the place, and they pulled back on it. I really think that CEOs' mindsets are going to change over time, because we're seeing that employees aren't going to stand for it. Right? So I think that's where we're heading.
Thank you. And I love the reference to that article there. It really is about challenging everything. Alice, thoughts? Again, I always love talking to you because you have that small company perspective as well for these companies that have always had to be agile, but now it's like agility on steroids.
Yeah. So, I mean, I actually want to build on a little bit of what Beth was just saying now, but also to the first question, which is that I think a lot of our clients are being asked now to revisit how they work. Right. So when I hear from my clients, I want to come back to the office, my first question is, well, tell me why. What is hard about being remote? Right. Because for sure, we know, because every time we've tried to do this, even with just one day back in the office, right, the first thing that the employees say to us is, why do we have to come back? I'm just as productive from home. The company is doing well. They just shared with us that we did as well year over year. We grew 10% year over year. Why does everyone have to come back if this is the case? Invariably, almost always what I hear from the business owner is it's extraordinarily hard to train people from home. You know, I feel like when people are sitting next to each other, they learn through osmosis. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's easier for me when I can just drop in and ask somebody for something instead of having to schedule a Zoom meeting. And while I think I have a lot of compassion for these ideas, I think what Beth just said about, you know, being called to challenge yourself and your limiting beliefs is the kind of questioning that I go through with my clients, right? So is this what's easier for you, or is this what's actually best for your business? And I think that's a challenging question to face, but I think it's an important one to ask yourself. You know, because I think really what we're finding is that often we can partner with the business owner to put in a new and more formalized training program, a new and more formalized onboarding, you know, regular stay interviews. And then all of a sudden it does feel easy to work from home. It's right. It's about creating a system around a thing that kind of happened in maybe a natural or informal place previously that maybe needs more structure around it now, but it isn't impossible to overcome that hill. But then the next thing I say to the clients is, okay, but if you are determined that, because some of our clients will just say to us simply like, Alice, I really get that, but like, I don't want to have to do that work. I'm a business leader. I've been doing this for my life this way. I don't want to learn a new way. I'm unwilling to do it. I want them to come back.
Love the
And then I say to them, okay, great. You're telling me the truth, that we can start always building from the truth, right? But then let's talk about why this should matter to them, right? And I think this goes back to the point that Ellen was saying about employee communications, right? Like we have to craft a story that is meaningful to the employee about why this matters for them, what this does for them, not for you, right? If it's just about, well, this makes my life easier, you know, I probably would say at least 50 employees don't really care. 50% of employees don't care about making their boss's life easier, right? They want their life to be easier. And I think particularly when we're still facing like, my kid's school is closing at least twice a month. You know what I mean? How could I possibly come back to the office, right? Like we need to craft a story and a communication that matters to the employee. The other thing I will say is that like some of my clients are kind of going what I would frankly call the bribing route. Like, oh, we're going to have catered lunch in the office and we're going to have like on-site massages and like those kinds of things. And I mean, I think the interest in that lasts for about, a week on the short end, a month on the long end. But then after that, it doesn't, that's not enough. Right. And so I think while it's nice to talk about perks, like perks as a strategy is not enough of a strategy in my view here. The other thing I'll say, Jamie, just a reflection, and this is anecdotal,
please.
But what we're really seeing is that it has a lot to do with business owners' ages, who wants folks to come back. And I know that's maybe not PC to say, but our business owners over 50 are like, we have to get back to the office. And our business owners under 50 are like, we don't really care if we ever come back. And so I think it's something to really challenge yourself about as it relates to who you want to retain in your business and what your ongoing talent strategy is. But if part of your talent strategy is hiring a younger workforce, I think it's going to be a harder road to hoe bringing people back.
I think because it's also harder for leaders. What I'm finding is it's harder for leaders to promote and know their talent who are remote. So you definitely get a halo effect with the folks that are in the office. So if there is going to be that balance and that continued hybrid, there are so many things in the organization, developing talent, promoting talent, getting to know talent, that need to change in order to support that new way of working. And that's scary, right?
Absolutely.
It's generally scary.
It is. Change is hard. One of our clients in the entertainment space told me last week, 70% of their employees have been hired since the pandemic started. And when you look at the multi-generational impact, Alice, I was thinking on what you were saying. So much of how we show up as humans and as leaders goes back to how we learned to learn. So based on when you, Kira Copperman, one of the experts on our team, has spoken about this on former panels, but your style of leadership, retaining information, it all has to do with how you took in information. So for those of us, myself included, who used to get chalk on my hands with the eraser and all that stuff that happened, as I've navigated my career, I've had to sort out. But Alice, when you think about an organization that is, has tons of Gen Y, Gen Z, they learn to learn through smart boards and all that. And they're like, game on, I've got it. I can do half of this on my phone, my friend. And I'm going to also make sure I've got time to live my best life outside of our core working hours. So it's all about that talent strategy that you laid out. And it's really about the future of work. It's like we are, I think, at a moment in as we look into season 3 of this pandemic, this is just kind of what is. So if you're going to be modern and retain and be relevant to the market as a business, I think it's just about getting on the bus a bit, but not an easy message to deliver. Or to hear. There was a 60 Minutes piece that I think I've watched 4 times now, where basically it just was, ripe with data. And they said that pre-pandemic, 1 in 67 jobs was remote. And in the US, it's now 1 in 7. I mean, this is massive change management during a time where people are also just figuring out like the thickness of their mask to leave the house. Like there's just so much information that people need to take in. It's a lot, but I think a lot of it really boils down to change management. So like the when, the where, and how we work, it's completely transformed, and it can be really unsettling. It's like flying between 2 trapezes, I think, for a lot of humans. And whether we're talking about, restructuring teams to fill in gaps or establishing these fluid processes around hybrid work, it has changed big time, and all these other disruptions that keep on coming. So I'd love to just think through what are the change management techniques that companies can lean on to help them through these times and keep folks in jobs. So Beth, as our change management guru, I'd love to kick it off with you.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is none of these principles are new, right? Change management is a science. It's just that certain things have become even more important and need to be at the forefront of any strategy during this time, right? And one is leadership visibility, back to a point that was made before. It's not only for those on-site workers, but for everyone. Leadership needs to stand behind what they're doing. They need to be visible. They need to have those stay interviews, develop those one-on-one conversations and relationships. And when I talk about leadership, I'm talking about all managers, right? Managers, people don't leave companies, they leave managers, and that's still valid, right? The second thing is over communicating, right? In a very honest and candid way. People can read through bull. let's just say, right? So being candid, and leaders think they need to have every answer before they can say something. They don't. They can bring people along the way with them, right? And then the third thing is continually giving opportunities for feedback and giving employees a voice, right? In those one-on-one conversations, in those stay interviews, whether it's surveys, whether it's forums, but allowing those mechanisms to continue. With change management, it's never one and done. So I spent a lot of time educating leaders in the past that it's not just about communicating the change. You haven't finished your job, right? It's constantly going back and iterating and checking in and seeing what can be improved. So those are just a couple things.
Absolutely. And Alice, Ellen, any thoughts on that?
So I would just say I agree with Beth that the fundamentals are exactly the same, but one of the things that we're seeing kind of related to what you were just mentioning before, Jamie, about learning and folks coming from their own experience is that when we're thinking about things like management training, onboarding for folks, transitioning from roles or cross training, one of the things that we've actually started doing with some of our clients is tracking differently. And it's less to do, it ends up kind of correlating to age sometimes, but it's really about technology facility, right? So for instance, I'll just speak from my own experience with my own team, right? Like I designed a first onboarding week that I thought would take folks a week. And what we found in practice is folks within a decade of my age, it takes them about a week. Folks who are more than a decade older than me, it takes them closer to 2 to 3 weeks. Folks who are more than a decade younger than me, it honestly takes them a day and a half, right? But like learning this by kind of having this onboarding process and having different folks go through it and kind of seeing what their experience is has allowed us to kind of track that in a different way, but also to have a communication about like this, all of this is normal, right? If you do it in a day or you take 3 weeks, that is normal. And there is room for you here. And so it's an opportunity, I think, to be more inclusive in your systems design that allows people to really feel like they're a part of an organization. And particularly in this remote environment where for some people, like you're saying, they're learning. And I think that's the way we have to think about it, right? They're learning on 6 different levels at once. Whereas for some other folks, they're only learning one thing, right? And so like having that kind of humanity, compassion, and inclusion perspective, I think has made a huge difference for us.
Absolutely. Someone I'd imagine a decade younger, they're like, oh no, I can work remote. I've been doing this forever. Where other folks are like, can you just spell Zoom? Is that with 2 Z's? Like, it's just right. There's that moment you could see from Go where certain organizations were so agile. On the point about working remote, what we've heard from so many clients also is that they have really finally felt that they could weave in DEIB to their culture in a remote environment. What we heard are that many folks who historically were marginalized felt that these equal size Zoom boxes gave them more access to tables that they typically did not have someone who walked in similar shoes and looked like them say, oh, pull up a chair. We would love your opinion on this, because of all the bias interruption that happens as humans get together at work. I've also heard from clients that in stay interviews, very senior leaders who they treasure have said, I got to tell you, one of the reasons I'm crushing it during this time is because we were all back at the office on the 32nd floor. I had microaggressions that came my way daily. And when I can hold space for when it feels difficult and like quickly process it with my partner, or quickly like, do what I need to do to like get through that unfortunate part of this country that we live in. I can move through those emotions and I can honor them. I don't have to like wait till I get home at 9 o'clock to say to my partner, this really hard thing happened at a 9 a.m. meeting and it broke my heart. And I still needed to present this deck because these folks were in from London, right? Like there's that whole piece of this overdue racial reckoning in our country that I think that has helped folks have honest conversations about what it is like to be in person and process what feels like a microaggression, and then still need to over deliver and say something brilliant in the moment. So yeah, I think that in a way, some of the DEIB strategies have progressed faster because of this remote piece. Again, we're as humans learning things on 6 levels all at once, all at the same time. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? I think we're going to do a quick poll, but any other thoughts on the change management or any of the 12 things that I just stated? Okay, so let's go to the poll. we're just going to launch the poll. We'd love to take a moment to hear from you. So we had mentioned that interim talent, a few times here, it is something that can be part of the strategy to kind of import these ideas to organizations that are so strapped. So we would love to hear if using interim is part of your overall staffing strategy. Yeah, it's interesting to see that a lot of the folks here have that very modern view. Yeah, we ended with about 64% are using it. I'm thrilled to hear that. I've been a fan of that since we launched Inspire 15 years ago. And the idea is that to bring in someone who is a pro that can kind of parachute in and do a specific piece of work, frees up the rest of the permanent full-time folks to do everything that's already very much that they're already charged with. It also gives employees extra beautiful minds at a time where someone might be out on parental leave, or a job's been open a really long time, and it just kind of helps to fill in those strategies. I know before the pandemic, Google had reported that they had a plan where 50% of their workforce was going to always be contingent, 50% was going to be permanent. And the contingent could be a mashup of interim, call centers, offshore, like a whole bunch of different things. But that idea of being able to kind of have these elastic resources that you can, stretch and kind of dial up and dial down was something that they were onto even before the pandemic. I want to switch to the topic of leaves a bit. So family paid leave is in the federal spotlight. You can't turn on the news without that popping up. And whether or not there's a nationwide mandate, that issue cannot be ignored. According to the Institute for Women's Policy Research, for women without PTO, paid time off, nearly 30% have dropped out of the labor force within the first year after becoming a parent. Think of all the progress that folks who identify as female have made over generations, and to hear that 30% drop is a lot. And according to National Bureau of Economic Research, close to 2/3 of small companies in New York and New Jersey support family leave. So this is something, again, as we kind of redesign the future of work, we are all needing to really very much be mindful of. And also, not to there's so much happening at once, but like, remember over winter break where like everyone that you knew either had COVID or had a loved one who had COVID, like I know it's only February 2nd, but like just to acknowledge that learning curve, that people returned from what was supposed to be a winter break either flat out exhausted because they didn't have the restful period, or needing to leave because this Omicron, which is a rascal, had hit their home. So like, just to call that out, we have a lot of clients who have folks with more leave than they had been expecting kicking off 22. So would very much love to hear any thoughts on that. And Alice, if you have ideas that you want to share there.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, so again, we focus on small business. So long-term leaves is just generally something small businesses can't really support. The longest leaves we kind of ever see are really related to 6 months. But some strategies that we've seen this year, we've really encouraged our clients to expand whatever is company provided to include paid family and medical leave, right? So we want to make sure that we're not privileging certain types of family choices. We also want to make sure we're not privileging caregiving over self-care in a really important time when people are struggling. We've also really encouraged our clients to allow people to take that on a flexible basis, right? So that may mean, like, we've seen some of our clients and their teams go to, okay, I'm going to take leave every afternoon or every morning, which kind of allows for childcare. But maybe if a company can only offer 4 weeks, now that offers 2 months of relief to a particular family, right? We've also seen some intermittent pieces where it's like, hey, my mom can handle my baby 3 days a week, but not the other two. It's like, okay, great. Take this 4 weeks with 2 days a week, and we can really support you in kind of managing that, right? So thinking about how to be flexible about that, but also still kind of supporting a client thinking about that. And I think we still need to put boundaries around it, right? So we like to say on a rolling 12-month basis, right? That's not this kind of infinite, overwhelming kind of piece. I think for sure, we've also really been thinking about, and I love the way you were talking about how DEIB can kind of come into the space. But one of the things that it feels like is a wall that's great that's breaking down around work is a willingness to say, hey, this is what's hard in my life right now. And I need some kind of accommodation, whether we're talking about neurodiversity or disability or family status, but like a willingness to say, like, this is really hard and I need help. And I feel like that entering the workplace in a much less formal way has been actually a boon. Like, it's creating much more conversation, but also much more opportunity in this kind of, the way that Ellen brought up stay interviews, for you to like know what matters to your employee and help meet that need. Right. And so we're just trying to think about how to be more generous. So for instance, we've changed our bereavement leave to what we're calling a loss leave policy. So we say family member or one like a family member as it relates to loss or paid leave. We also like to think, as it relates to loss leave, we talk about loss of pregnancy. And also we do loss of pets. I think for so many folks, like during this pandemic, their pet was their lifeline. Loss of a pet feels like maybe a bigger loss than it ever has before. And then we've also moved to making bereavement unlimited. I think that that's an opportunity. Not all of our client companies can support it, but understanding that grief is not linear, understanding that maybe the next Mother's Day, Father's Day, anniversary, birthday is actually the harder time, understanding that different cultures have different funeral practices that sometimes are immediate, sometimes are 3 months, sometimes are a year later. So really trying to broaden that. And I'll just say, I'm sure we have some business owners and HR leaders here who are like, how do you manage that, Alice? That's a terrible idea. People will always take advantage of it. And my feeling is that it's really about communication, right? If we train our managers well and we're having clear communication with team members, they don't generally take advantage of that, right? They want to be doing good work because that's meaningful to them. So
there also has to be a sense of trust that goes along with that. And in particular, in this environment, that you're treating people like professionals, right?
Absolutely.
And if you're giving them that leeway, that there's a trust that they'll use it appropriately.
So Beth, maybe this is a time to, this other thing that we wanted to cover, and I know we have just about 12 minutes left, just to get practical, how employers can accommodate these leaves when they're already pinched for talent.
Right. Look, I think I'm a great example, right? So I was just brought in by an asset management firm, a large asset management firm that has 4 senior HRBPs going on maternity leave. So leave of absences, either overlapping or successively. Right. But because of my background experience and the fact that I have touched so many different areas of HR and can do all that, I'm being brought right in and just jumping in to advance their agenda, not covering 4 jobs, just me, but the biggest pieces and the priority pieces. So they are not going to feel the impact of those leaves in a way that they would if they weren't otherwise using this talent. And in fact, I may be able to even further advance their agenda and bring some new eyes to things.
That's the magic we always find with interim, is you can bring that you bring that seasoned approach. So you kind of like leave things even maybe a little bit more innovative than when you had left, because your ideas and the way that you role model those get infused to maybe the more junior talent in a lot of cases that you might be covering for. It really is, I think, a great example of just how interim and fractional talent can kind of fill in gap after gap after gap. It's a good time to be at that asset management company. Oh my gosh. It's nice during these times to see happy milestones for folks. As we think about, employers looking outside for talent feverishly, are there more, I'd love to hear a little bit about the idea of upskilling. If there are employees looking inside, they can kind of look at their treasured people that they have, compensate them well with the right benefits. Thank you, Ellen, for that point, and then upskill them and just let them know that you see the X factor, you'd love for them to really evolve, and kind of upskilling them in roles that they're having that difficulty recruiting for. So I'd love to hear, and Alice, maybe you can kick this one off. Are there kind of advantages and disadvantages for hiring from within, if you will, that our participants should keep in mind?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, a huge advantage is that someone's already onboarded to your culture and systems. It means that they're going to get up to speed significantly faster in the role that they have, right? They're learning one thing again instead of multiple things. I think a drawback can be sometimes, you might be taking somebody with less experience in that area, right? So like they're learning in the one thing they're learning may take longer. But I do think also demonstrating, particularly in challenging times, to your entire team, your commitment to trying to retain people, particularly if you're letting go of a particular skill or service, is extraordinarily meaningful to the team and really impactful to culture. So I would say for sure, that's an important reason why. I also think thinking about ways that you can do it that are kind of, compelling, right? So like we work a lot with our clients, like I said, to have like, well, I'm working now and I'm not working now. But sometimes when there's a specific scope of work that maybe multiple people could do or could be cross-trained to do one specific job, and they want to take additional shifts, or they want to take additional kind of, I'm willing to work 5 hours on the weekend because I can't go anywhere because of the virus anyway.
Right.
And you can give them either a particular bonus or shift pay for that. We're seeing that a lot actually in our healthcare clients, where some of their admin staff are actually taking, on-site shifts, in terms of nursing home or assistive therapy or physical therapy front desk, and they're happy to be making the extra money during a time when they're already on site, or that makes sense for them. So just a few strategies, and would love to hear from my colleagues on the panel. Yeah.
Ellen, any thoughts from you on that one? You've seen it all.
Yes. And so I think having a good mix of both upskilling and promoting from within is really, really important, but you do need to bring in those new eyes like Beth was talking about. So I think right now, investing on lateral moves for your talent, promotions for your internal talent is critically important. It breeds goodwill in your organization. Make sure people know about it, celebrate it, make a big deal out of these things, and look at transferable skills so you can bring people in. And Melissa from Inspire shared this great statistic with us yesterday that actually the lateral moves create more stickiness amongst employees than promotions. So it's really interesting to think about. But I do think you need to bring in outsiders who may challenge assumptions, bring in new experience, maybe from an industry that you want to be more like as an organization. So I think it's important to have a mix.
I love that, kind of importing those fresh ideas. So we're going to go, there's a lot of questions in the chat and a number that were sent in advance. We're going to go to the Q&A in just a moment. But before we do, we love to always ask our panelists during these interesting times what they themselves are doing for self-care. It's a tricky time to be a human and to work in HR. So Alice, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the huge benefits for many of us during the pandemic was kind of getting more time with family. So that's been a huge one for me that has been like really restorative and rewarding. I was sharing before, I upped my sleep minimum. So I've upped my sleep minimum from 6 hours to 7 hours during the pandemic, which is
nice.
Hugely amazing. And the other thing, so simple, but like I started forcing myself to drink 16 ounces of water an hour, and it is life-changing.
An hour?
Yeah, you do have to. I mean, yeah. Well, you're home. You can go to the bathroom.
Right. Do you have like a big jug that tracks your? Let's see what
I have this, and then I have 2 glasses on my desk at all times.
I love it. Oh
and
my
it
God,
also makes you get up more, right? You have to go fill your water, and you have to go to the bathroom, so you're like not sitting here.
Get those steps in. You are officially my most hydrated friend. Okay, Beth, over to you.
Well, Alice and I were talking about this earlier, and I've also prioritized the sleep thing. I don't know about anybody else, but since I've had kids, sleep hasn't been there for me. So this has been a time to focus on that. I think also getting at least an hour of movement every day, right? And I have gotten back to cooking more at home, which as a working mom, I was not focusing on. I was just doing, running around so much that I was
Yeah.
ordering in or doing this. So I think focusing on wellness in so many different ways like that.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Alan, what about you?
So mine's a little extreme because I'm taking a break from paid work. And this is a gift to myself. It's very topical. I have a son who has learning differences, and that really came into stark awareness, not really contrast, but awareness for me during the pandemic. And I was beating myself up about feeling like I was letting people down on all fronts. So my gift, my self-care, is to just do one job, which is for right now, is really focusing on being a parent and really enjoying it.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm thrilled for you. And that is a gift that your child will take with them on their journey. There's something about being still for all of us where we've just learned a little bit more about who lives in our homes. Yeah. All right, we're going to go to the speed round in the last couple of minutes that we have. So what are some processes and practices that will help us with knowledge sharing and continuity while someone's out on leave? If there's an interim person, like what are just some like tactical things that people can take with them, processes and practice? Any thoughts on that?
We're a big fan of what we call a knowledge base. So making sure that everyone puts everything in the same filing system in the same place, all the same. Very simple, but honestly, really critically important. And then we require our team to update their standard operating procedures for how their job works every month. So that there's kind of always something that's relatively recent, because I think it's really challenging when you write it and then it's been a year and then somebody has to go out. So those are two easy practices.
Love that. All right. And we'll go to the next one.
Oh, I'm sorry, go on. I was going to say also for interim talent, appropriate onboarding and offboarding overlap where you can have that.
Yes. The knowledge transfer.
So that the knowledge transfer.
Beautiful. I love, those are the most successful parental leaves that we've done. There's always a little bit of time for the person. And also when they come back, to give them a soft landing, to kind of scrub them back into surgery, right? Like let them know if those bookends can be there. Those are always ideal. Okay, next one. Oh, this is a great question. What are some ways you're able to positively build and reinforce the company culture? The feeling of connectedness and belonging in community is so critical for a virtual environment. Any thoughts on culture building, positive reinforcement?
The Times was doing something great before I left, where they were doing these, I can't remember the tool that was used, but it was coffee dates. So you could have a virtual coffee with people from anywhere in the company. This is sort of the system would match you, and you'd get to know a new person and what their department was like. So a really fun way to learn the company.
Oh, I love that.
I think another thing that we do is we encourage all of our clients to have a celebration channel in Slack, and then like a celebration practice in whatever team meetings they have. So like really encouraging folks to acknowledge each other's work, great work product, the ways that you show up for each other. And then in our team meeting every Friday, we require everyone on our team to share their win of the week. So something they're proud that they've done. It can be personal or professional, and then to shout out someone on their team who's helped them this week. And we find that that's like everyone leaves that meeting being like, I love my team. So those are easy ones.
It's like positive, feel good.
I think Inspire just did a great job with it, actually, bringing all their consultants and team members together to have fun, right? There was an event where we had an illusionist in, so utilizing the mediums that you can, getting creative, and it was fantastic and interactive. And I feel like I got to know everybody and we had this shared experience. It was great.
Oh, I'm so glad. And we had everyone share, that illusionist was mind blowing, but we had everyone share what they're doing for self-care. We're always kind of crowdsourcing. Last question that someone asked, I think we touched on this a little bit, but any best practices to help folks who are from traditionally underrepresented groups or folks with certain disabilities feel more comfortable with remote working? We're always looking for ways to weave in DEIB into the whole employee experience. So I'd love to end on this one. Any creative strategies to help folks just feel, particularly folks who might not feel like there's someone else like them in the room, now that we're virtual, any creative strategies just to build upon that and create that sense of inclusion?
So we've included what we call affirmative accommodations as part of our regular onboarding process, right? So the idea is that as part of onboarding, as part of your like HR meeting, we actually ask affirmatively if you need accommodations rather than waiting for an employee to come to you. And we encourage a lot of our clients to, if they can afford it, have a home office setup kind of allowance that kind of can allow people to get whatever tools they need, right? And some of that might be a formal accommodation, but for others, it may be less formal, so for some neurodiverse folks, like, fidgeters or standing desks or,
Sure.
timers or things like that, that can really help with their work. So that's one way to do it. But I also think that really affirmatively asking about folks' identities and then being willing to celebrate those, right? So like very simple yesterday, talking for 5 minutes on a team meeting about what Lunar New Year is and hearing from our team members who are celebrating that, what that's like, and doing that for Diwali and doing that for, so asking for folks at part of their onboarding, are there holidays that you celebrate that are meaningful to you that you would like us to acknowledge at work? And just, I think little things like that can be so huge and being seen in a way you've never been seen before.
Beautiful.
I
Thank
think
you.
it's also changing policies to be explicit about those things, so that people know. It's also a great way to sell the organization to talent when they know that's part of your policy and part of, something that you ask for, but it's also out there for everybody to see. Things like we do ergonomic checks for people that may have differences or need different setups. We, just all those types of things.
Those things go such a long way. Thank you so much for this time, Alice, Ellen, Beth. This was fantastic. And thank you so much for just sharing all of your knowledge with us. We appreciate it. For those of you who joined, thank you so much. We'll look forward to seeing you back here next month. If you need us for anything, our info is here. And in the meantime, stay well. Take good care. Bye.